Hi and welcome to LP4 number 2. We see light at the end of the tunnel, I think, at this point on this class, which is good. This chapter is on social and regulatory issues around privacy and security and intellectual property as they relate to the internet and e-marketing. And I will speak primarily anecdotally to the first two, privacy and security. Just throw out some issues that might spark your interest and make you think on a bigger scale about the matter, particularly as they relate to your kids. But first, from a business perspective, does trust really matter? Is it important? And if it is important, why is it important? Do people's attitudes about privacy and security of their personal data affect trust? And I'd say, yes, they do. But it's probably generational, and it's something because kids, a 10-year-old kid who's using Facebook, or a 15-year-old maybe doesn't appreciate the implications, the long-term implications about giving up certain information about themselves and how that might affect their privacy and security over time, or even in the short term for that matter. Now, from again a business perspective, are there benefits to maintaining a high trust level with your customers? Yeah, there is. Trust is directly correlated, of course, with loyalty, and loyal customers are exceedingly loyal customers, or satisfied customers are by far and away your most profitable. There is the old age that it's 5 to 6 times more expensive to garner a new customer through promotional efforts or marketing efforts than it is to simply maintain them as a satisfied customer. Which always makes me wonder why cell phone companies and others are so quick to want to argue with you about an issue of poor service than they are to fix it when there's other choices in the marketplace to easily go to. Because you don't have to spend time promoting to loyal customers, you get higher profit margins, you increase your growth, and you can actually, if you're really, really good at it like Apple, you can turn that loyal following into a long-term competitive advantage. It becomes very easy every time you introduce a new product or a new launch. It's easy to generate interest. You only have to do it by announcing that you've got a new product. There are recent studies that show that people are uncomfortable with certain kinds of use of their data, particularly behavioral targeting. This is touched on to some extent, not so much the reaction, but the use of behavioral targeting in politics in the Persuaders video that I encouraged you to watch in this LP. It's noted on a video. It's interesting. And one of the, that I'll talk about in a minute, one of the companies that was highlighted in that video is a company called Acxiom. And I guess I'll break off anecdotally real quickly here. And talk about some examples of tracking, and that used in concert with behavioral profiling. You probably know, and if you don't, it's a little scary, and if you know, it's kind of makes you throw up your hands, me anyway, and say, Well, what's the use? Any search you've ever done on Google, is saved on a server. So anything you've gone and looked at, your kids have looked at, your wife has looked at on the web is saved on a server, and that's used as part of an ongoing effort to develop or structure personas for you. And Google knows you and virtually all its other users by your LP address. So most people don't turn off their computers very often. They use it day to day, and by not doing that, when you log back on, you're essentially, unless you make efforts to do otherwise, you will come on as the same LP address. And so that's the whole value of collecting this data. You develop a profile or a persona for a particular IP address, and they can tell if there's more than one person using that IP address. They can say, well, there appears to be two kids, a wife, an older female and an older male, which presumably is the mother and the father. They can not only tell that, they can tell which person is on it and the moment by previous patterns in their behavior when they do their searches. And so several years ago, Google tried to buy Acxiom, which was profiled in that video. Now the thing about Google is they recognize you by an IP address, but they don't know your name and address. On the other hand, Acxiom does. They've been doing this since the 50s, I think, or late 40s. And as technology has advanced, so has their ability to analyze that data. And so Google tried to buy Acxiom, and had they been able to do that, they would have been able to use algorithms to match the IP addresses with the actual individuals that Acxiom tracks in their database. By far, at least the majority, maybe not all of them, but probably, and I'm just guessing, 80 or 85% of them, they would have been able to say, well, this IP address is actually Jim Jones in Cleveland, Ohio at X address. And those two kids are his, and that's his wife. What Acxiom does over time is very similar to Google. They just do it a little bit differently. They gather their information from credit card purchases and other, title companies and insurance companies and car companies, and they're watching what people are buying, and as they go through a kind of a life cycle process. So Google was not able to fortunately for most of us, was not able to execute that purchase of Acxiom because the government nixed it based around privacy and security. The way that Google got around that very quickly and cleverly, although there is with their own iPhone, their own Google phone, although it's not as popular as some others. But that's just a phone anymore. It's just a small computer that has a telephone function. And so with people surfing on the web, as a telephone customer, they know their name and their address, and they could match that then with previous IP address profiles. So they did some of what they were intending to do by buying Acxiom anyway. And as time goes on, I'm sure they'll come up with other ways to identify IP addresses to an actual name and address or personality. Another thing that's big in the news with DMVs would be that's around privacy. I just saw this the other day, are these police cars that have multiple cameras on them that are watching cars come at them, pass them, so on and so forth, and they can instantly in real time run profiles on the license plates and find out whether or not the tags are current, whether or not the car is stolen, back taxes due, outstanding warrant, whatever, and they can turn right around and pull them over. I think the NAACP is getting, no, what is it, yeah, not the NAACP, but the one that is about civil rights in general and whether or not privacy rights are being violated. And the last one is this RFIDs, radio frequency IDs, which started out as a way to keep track of inventory, and they will continue over the next several years to do just that. There's literally a small chip put onto everything that's manufactured, right down to a can of beans, and that can of beans has its own personal ID. So if Walmart buys a case of them, it can tell which individual cans are located in which individual stores. And in fact, when that can is taken off the shelf in short order and you put it into your cart, there'll be something in the cart that monitors those RFIDs on the items that you're buying, so that when you get to the checkout stage, you're really already checked out. It's all totaled up already. You won't need those scanning machines anymore. If you take something out of your cart before you get to the checkout stand, it just comes off the total. Very efficient, very, very good for business. The other application that's of interest is in the health industry. And they'll be able to put an RFID under your skin, and then that will monitor a myriad of different chemical activities in the body, so that they could estimate whether or not you're going to have a heart attack or a stroke in the next several days, whether or not your liver's going bad. And these will be transmitting information to your HMO regularly, 24/7 actually. And so if there's something goes wrong in your body, the RFIDs will pick them up, the radio frequency ID will pick it up, send a message to the HMO, and you'll get a phone call. You better get in here right away because you're probably going to have a stroke in the next hour, something like that. Or you may have a heart attack, same thing. So they'll probably introduce them into the elderly first. That makes sense. And at my age, I go, okay, I don't care if these other things are happening, because I'd rather know my major health signs in the moment anyway. They'll probably introduce them on the battlefield, because as they introduce them into society so that society will be able to accept them. And that potentially would tell a MASH unit if a soldier's been wounded, kind of what his body signs are, where his organs might be failing before he ever gets into the operating tent. So that would be very valuable. They can read body signs better than a doctor can interpret them from other kinds of machinery. There are parents that put them into even young children so that they can track them. If they were kidnapped, they can track their location. There's apps so that you can literally see where your child is on a GPS. So that all sounds good. It's all great. Of course, the extension of all those things are it can know a lot more. Let's say the RFID that your HMO has put into you, it can know a lot more about you than just your basic body signs. It could tell, first of all, where you are. It's imperative to know where you are. It would know in case something goes wrong, so they can go pick you up. It would know if you're having sex. It would know probably who you're having sex with, and it would probably know what kind of sex you're having. So while databases start out to be singular in nature, our uses by a particular technology often start out to be singular in nature. They can morph into something far more insidious and negative. So that is the basic. You know, there's some advantages in tracking people and people knowing where you are from a business perspective. You know, if it's noon and somebody knows based on your telephone or an RFID that you're downtown and you like Italian food, they can start sending you pop-ups or notifications on your cell phone that there's an Italian restaurant within 1 or 2 blocks away. I mean, there's lots of positive things. Or that they know that you're a camper, they can tell you that when you get close to REI that there's a sale going on these items. But there is